It's not death that frightens me, but the lucidity of being alive. There is a type of despair that doesn't scream. It doesn't break windows or write dramatic farewell letters. It simply ... observes, with a cutting clarity, almost surgical. Emil Cioran, the Romanian philosopher who transformed insomnia into a philosophical method, called this lucid despair, the ability to look into the abyss of existence without blinking, without consolation, without comforting lies. But here's the unsettling paradox. When you stare into the abyss long enough, you realize it's not just empty. It also thinks, it also observes you. And perhaps, just perhaps, it's precisely in this exchange of gazes between you and the void that the strangest form of freedom resides. Today we're diving into the icy waters of Cioran's thought. Be prepared, there will be no lifeguards. Emil Cioran wasn't a philosopher of answers. He was a specialist in questions nobody wants to ask at 3 in the morning. Born in Romania in 1911, he spent most of his life in Paris, writing in French about themes academic philosophy preferred to avoid: mortal boredom, the futility of optimism, the unbearable weight of simply existing. His books offer no systems or doctrines. They are fragments, aphorisms sharp as blades, confessions from someone who decided to live without existential anesthesia. Cioran doesn't console us. He challenges us to look at what we avoid. Is consciousness a curse or a privilege? In this essay, we'll explore 5 lessons about lucid despair that can, paradoxically, make us freer. Before we continue, if this theme resonates with you, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. And in the comments, tell me, have you ever felt that thinking too much is a form of suffering? Let's talk. Cioran had a provocative thesis. Human consciousness is not an evolutionary gift, it's a defective mutation. He wrote, "It would be so good to be a stone." And it wasn't melancholic poetry, it was diagnosis. Think about it. Animals don't have existential crises. An eagle doesn't wake up questioning the meaning of hunting. A cat doesn't collapse because its life is predictable. But we, humans, are cursed with self-awareness. It's not enough to exist, we need to know we exist. And worse, we need to justify this existence. For Cioran, this capacity to turn upon ourselves, to analyze every action and thought, is what separates us from the unconscious paradise of animals and plants. He called this the fall into lucidity. Adam wasn't expelled from Eden for eating the apple, he was expelled for gaining self-awareness. Lucid despair begins when you realize you can't turn this off. You can't return to being naive. You can't unsee what you've already seen about the absurd nature of life. It's like learning Santa Claus doesn't exist, but on a cosmic scale. And there's no going back. But here lies Cioran's first lesson. Recognizing consciousness as disease isn't pessimism. It's radical honesty. It's stopping pretending we're well-adjusted to the world and admitting that our maladjustment is, in fact, the sign that we're still philosophically alive. Most people spend their entire lives trying to anesthetize this lucidity with work, entertainment, relationships, alcohol, religion, ideologies. Cioran suggests something different. What if we simply admitted that living consciously hurts? What if we stopped seeking cures and started observing the disease? It's not masochism. It's a strange form of courage. The courage not to turn away when the existential mirror reflects something uncomfortable. Because maybe, just maybe, It's in accepting this discomfort that we can find not happiness, but something more valuable: authenticity. We live in a culture obsessed with optimism. Think positive. Everything has a purpose. Tomorrow will be better. Motivational phrases everywhere. Inspirational posts flooding social media. An entire industry built on the promise that happiness is just around the corner. You just have to want it enough. Cioran saw all this with horror and irony. For him, optimism isn't just naive. It's a form of symbolic violence. It's the imposition of a false narrative about existence, an aggressive denial of reality. Think about it. When someone is truly suffering, an irreparable loss, a pain without solution, and you say it will pass, be strong, everything has a silver lining, what are you really doing? You're invalidating that person's experience. You're saying, your pain isn't real enough. You should be feeling differently. Cioran had no patience for this. He said that the true pessimist isn't the one who cries before tragedy. It's the one who recognizes tragedy without needing to disguise it. And there's a form of respect for reality in this that compulsory optimism never offers. But attention. Cioran wasn't defending clinical depression or paralysis. He was attacking the tyranny of toxic positivity, that cultural demand that you must always be well, always productive, always evolving, as if admitting despair or doubt were moral failure. The second lesson is this: lucid despair isn't destructive nihilism. It's refusal to lie. It's saying, yes, life is absurd. Yes, there are no guarantees. Yes, often it's more suffering than joy. And yet, continuing. Not because there's hope, but because you've decided that truth is worth more than comfort. There's radical freedom in this. When you stop pursuing happiness as a moral obligation, when you accept that despair can be a legitimate response to the human condition, you can finally breathe, because you're no longer performing optimism for an imaginary audience. You're just ... being, with all the contradictions and open wounds that implies. Cioran suffered from chronic insomnia throughout his life, and instead of treating it as a disease, he transformed it into a philosophical laboratory. Sleepless dawns were his moment of greatest clarity, not despite the suffering, but through it. He wrote, "I don't sleep, therefore I exist, more intensely and desperately than any dreamer." Insomnia, for Cioran, was the state of pure consciousness. Without the filters of sleep, without the disguises of day, without social distractions, just you in the abyssal silence of 4 in the morning. And in that silence, thoughts that normally remain buried emerge with brutal clarity. It's during insomnia that you can no longer pretend. There's no meeting tomorrow to worry about, no series to watch, no conversation to distract you. It's just you and the fundamental questions. Why am I here? What am I doing? Does this make any sense? But here's the third lesson. Cioran discovered that insomnia didn't destroy him, it refined him. Like gold passed through fire. Each sleepless night was a layer of illusion burned away, and what remained was something truer, even if harder to carry. He didn't romanticize suffering, but he refused the idea that all suffering must be eliminated. Some pains, he argued, are portals to insights that comfort would never reveal. Think about your own life. When did you truly grow? In easy, comfortable moments? Or in those crisis nights when everything collapsed and you had to rebuild yourself? Cioran would say the second option isn't tragedy, it's initiation. Western philosophy always sought answers. Cioran sought intensity of experience, and insomnia was his privileged access route to what he called extreme vigilance, a state where you're so awake you see through the masks of everyday reality. I'm not suggesting you stop sleeping, but maybe it's worth paying attention to those moments of existential discomfort you normally try to anesthetize. Maybe they're trying to teach you something that can only be learned in the dark. One of humanity's most persistent obsessions is the search for meaning. Why are we here? And what is life's purpose? What should we do with our limited time? Cioran had a disturbing answer. Maybe there is no why, and maybe that's liberating. He wrote, "I only achieve fullness in the renunciation of meaning." What an extraordinary phrase. It's not surrender. It's radical acceptance that the universe doesn't owe us explanations. Existence simply happens, and our need to justify it is more about our anxiety than about the nature of things. Think about how much energy we spend trying to find our mission, our purpose, as if life were a puzzle to be solved. What if it's not? What if life is more like jazz, constant improvisation, with no definitive script? Cioran suggests that the obsessive search for meaning is in fact escape from freedom. Because if there's no predetermined meaning, then you're radically free to create your own, or to live without any, without guilt, without demands. The fourth lesson is this: lucid despair isn't absence of meaning, it's freedom before meaning. You don't need to find the answer, you can simply ... live, experiment, fail, change your mind. This terrifies because it removes security. If there's no cosmic script, then there are no excuses. You can't blame fate, God, society. You're naked before your own freedom. But see the other side. If there's no script, then there's no wrong way to live. There's no delay. There's no comparison that makes sense. Each person is improvising their path in an existence that promised no coherence. Cioran lived this radically. He didn't build an academic career, didn't accumulate possessions, didn't follow any traditional model of success. He simply wrote aphorisms, fragments, confessions, and died poor materially, but infinitely rich in intensity of experience. Living without why isn't nihilism, it's honesty. It's saying, I don't know why I'm here, but I am. And that's already strange and interesting enough to be worth observing. Let's return to the initial image, the abyss that also thinks. When Nietzsche said, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And when you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. He was warning about dangers. But Cioran did something different. He conversed with the abyss and discovered that on the other side there wasn't only terror. There was also clarity, perspective, and a strange form of companionship. Lucid despair, in Cioran's thought, isn't the end of the line. It's the beginning of another journey. When you stop avoiding the void, when you sit on the edge of the abyss and simply observe, something interesting happens. You realize you can coexist with it. You don't need to fall, you don't need to retreat. You can simply ... remain there, conscious of precariousness, but not paralyzed by it. The fifth and final lesson is this: there is freedom in conscious despair. Because when you've already looked at the worst, at absurdity, at finitude, at the lack of guarantees, and still chose to continue, you become unbeatable. Not in the sense of invulnerability, but in the sense that nothing else can frighten you with existential promises or threats. you've already been at the bottom. You've already seen there's no cosmic safety net, and discovered you can live that way anyway. This is what Cioran called desperation, not in the sense of giving up, but of de-hoping, living without expectations that enslave you, without promises that manipulate you, without illusions that infantilize you. It's mature freedom, the freedom of someone who no longer needs metaphysical crutches. And paradoxically, many people who reach this point report not depression, but lightness. Because when you accept that life has no obligation to make sense, you stop spending energy fighting with reality. You can finally dance with it, even if it's a strange dance, sometimes clumsy, frequently solitary. But it's your dance, authentic, without an invisible audience judging whether it's right or wrong. Cioran died in 1995 in Paris, after decades living with Alzheimer's. Cruel irony for a man whose life was consciousness itself on fire. But his legacy remains: the courage to think without parachutes. Lucid despair isn't a self-help philosophy. It won't make you happy, but it can make you free. Free from comforting lies, from impossible expectations, from the tyranny of forced optimism. And perhaps, deep down, that's what Cioran tried to teach us. That looking into the abyss, really looking, without blinking, isn't game over. It's the beginning of an honest conversation with yourself. The abyss thinks. And when you accept this, when you respond with your own lucidity, something is born. Not hope, but something more precious. Dignity before the absurd. Thank you for watching. In the comments, tell me which of these lessons resonated most with you. And share this video with someone who isn't afraid to think deeply.